Hello.
Hello, hello. We are live. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into our first ever live book club. Great to see you all. I see people in the chat from Texas and New York City and someone from Australia. So if you think you're coming from farther than Australia, please tell us in the chat. So great to see you all. You will know Joe and I as your hosts of Uncommon Sense, or maybe you don't. Please tune in if you haven't already. And of course, you know the wonderful Dale Ahlquist, the president of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. And many of you may know Susan Sutcher. She is not just the domestic empress anymore. She is now also the local society's coordinator for the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Thank you all again. It's so great to have you here. And now let's just hop right in. So, anybody have any first words before we really start the discussion? Nope, just me. Okay. Well, Dale, why don't we just start with the most important question? Let's talk about why The Everlasting Man? Why is this such an important and great work? Why are we sitting here reading it again today? What is the thing about The Everlasting Man that makes it such a significant piece of Chesterton's opus?
Grettelyn, I just enjoy watching you twist in the wind as long as possible. It's a great joy to be here, and this book is indeed an important book. And before I get personal, we'll talk about the effect this book has had on literary history. I mean, it next year is the 100th anniversary of the book. It's never been out of print. One of Chesterton's books that has been in print since it first came out. And I think the most significant story that many people are aware of is that this is the book that C.S. Lewis read when he was an atheist, and his life changed completely. He said famously, a young man who's serious about his atheism cannot be too careful about what he reads.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was the first reasonable defense of Christianity that he'd ever read, and he always recommended it to other people to read it. And of course, because it was so influential on him, things from this book turn up in C.S. Lewis's writings. And, Mere Christianity is, a marvelous, marvelous book. And so many of the main ideas come right from The Everlasting Man.
The original source.
Yeah.
Well, great. So any other historically significant moments of this book that you or any of our Joe or Susan, anyone want to chime in and help us understand where this comes from a little bit better?
Well, I think that, for me, The Everlasting Man, is important. I mean, it's something that I read again every year, because every time I read it, I'm going to get something more out of it. And especially now with this beautiful new edition, I'm kind of a book person. So as you can see, this is one of 26 bookshelves in the house. The mover informed me dolefully. But this edition has a ribbon. It's got like beautiful pages. It's got good heft. And so just adding this to the collection is I'm super excited about that. And then the notes, and then the commentary, and all of those things that I kind of say, okay, Gilbert, I don't know exactly what you're saying here, but I get your gist and I can move on. Now I don't have to do that because Dale's done the hard work for me, and I can go ahead and delve a little bit deeper, get a little bit more of the nuance, and even more so than all the times I've reread it over the years, I can really dive even deeper now. So I'm super excited to be doing this with everybody else and to get this chance to then really dive deep. We sometimes try to read The Everlasting Man in our local societies in 1 or 2 sessions. And, it's very difficult. We wouldn't discuss the New Testament all at once. So, not that this is scripture, but it's the same level of depth, and there's definitely layers of meaning. And so it really helps to just, take some time with it. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have some time with it and with all of you.
Mm.
Yeah, for my part, I'll just say it's always been one of my 2 favorite of Chesterton's books, and kind of Dale points this out in the editor's introduction that we read, or we asked people to read to get prepared for tonight, that I think, Dale, you referred to the bookends of Chesterton, orthodoxy and the everlasting man, and really all of it is kind of there. And I've sometimes used the phrase all of Chesterton is in all of Chesterton. Like, he's such a complete and integral thinker, that it's very easy to kind of find the same thoughts coming up again, and traces and different reflections on things. But really, these two books are, I think, the hallmarks of his system, if you will. And so if you just really want to get to know him and get to know and have really everything else he wrote just kind of unfurled before you and get unpacked, these are the two books to master. So The Orthodoxy and The Everlasting Man. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Well, I can say, the personal story is that this is the first Chesterton book that I ever read. And, sure, yeah, I read it on my honeymoon. Okay. Just like everybody else does. I read it because of the C.S. Lewis connection. It was C.S. Lewis who recommended the book to me. Okay. And, in fact, specifically, it was in the book by Sheldon Van Auken, A Severe Mercy, where it has several C.S. Lewis letters in that book. And in one of the letters, C.S. Lewis to Sheldon Van Auken recommends that he read The Everlasting Man. So I took it personally and brought the book with me on my honeymoon. And I have to say, I probably understood about 10% of what I was reading, but I couldn't get enough. It completely captured me. And I just said, I've never read anything like this in my life. I was a recent college graduate from a fairly reputable liberal arts college, and I felt a little bit offended and outraged that I had never been exposed to Chesterton or anything like this in college. And I think what most impressed me is how broad Chesterton was, how he wrote about everything and then somehow put all that together, put everything all together after writing about everything. And it was just an astonishing experience. And I knew I was just skimming the surface at the time. And so my goal then was to just get my hands on as much Chesterton as possible after that. But it would be many years before I returned to The Everlasting Man, because I just wanted to keep reading other Chesterton. And then when I did come back to it, it was, of course, a different book, completely different book, as every Chesterton book is the second time you read it. He's the only one, as I've said often, he's the only one who can rewrite a book between the times that you've read it.
Well, I have to say, I'm always impressed by people who have read The Everlasting Man as their first Chesterton book. So extra impressive, Dale. That's great.
Yeah, I'm impressed when other people do it. I was not impressed when I did it.
Was your wife impressed?
Yeah, well,
the
book that she read was very impressive. She read Les Miserables. And she speaks Italian, and so she naturally was reading a Spanish translation of the French book. And so we had a lot of languages going on there. And she started, I hope I don't give anything away, but Fantine dies. And and my wife just starts crying. She's just crying. And then she starts laughing, because we're on our honeymoon and she's crying. Yeah, it was a great moment.
I think the spoiler moratorium has to go away after 100 years, right? That seems if I may interject here just really quick with a commercial, because we've talked about this great new edition, and we'll put this link over in the chat, so you can go and get the book. It's in our store. This is the new annotated edition. Sorry, I'm covering up our faces with that. That's better. So that's the new annotated edition that you can go and find at our website, and it's a great book to have on your shelf. Even if you have other copies of The Everlasting Man, this is just a beautifully put together one. And again, as some people have said in the chat, you get Chesterton on Chesterton in this book, because Dale quotes Chesterton throughout in the footnotes, and brings insights in from other writings. So it's really just a marvelous work that we hope you'll get a copy of for yourself. Sorry, that's end of commercial.
No, it's great. Go pick up your copy right now. Yeah, wonderful. So it's good to kind of get the historical importance, the personal significance. But why is this such a significant work for so many Christians, Catholics? So many converts have kind of cited this work. What is it about the Everlasting Man that makes that happen so often?
Well, Chesterton, first of all, doesn't write it like anybody else, so he sneaks up on you. He doesn't. There's no classic arguments coming. There's just fresh, original perspectives that you are not expecting, and that's how he gets you. And you think you're following him, just like one of his detective stories, and then all of a sudden the solution is a complete surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the solution has been staring at you in the face the whole time, but he shocks you with what you already know. And when he pulls that, when he does the reveal, and he can do a reveal in just one quotation or just one aside, and some truth just puts its hooks in you. As Chesterton says, the truth, that's what the truth does. It puts its hooks in you. And that's how he does it. with flashes of insight that just speak directly to you. And more than one person on our list of converts has listed Chesterton's Everlasting Man as being the book that brought them to the faith.
Mm.
And I have to say that there was one really funny story that I can't repeat verbatim, but of a young lady who read the book, and when she finished the book, she threw it down and swore and said, "Now I have to become a Catholic."
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. I love that it forces us to look at our Christianity or Catholicism that maybe we've taken for granted. And he takes us outside, and then we look at it from a whole new perspective. And so even those of us who are already Christians, already Catholics, can sort of have a rebirth or a renewal of that faith, because we've got this new, fresh perspective that just allows us to really appreciate all the finer details and all the mysticism and all the beauty that's been right there under our nose, just like the answer to the mystery story, but we've just been blind to it, because we're so familiar. And he takes the familiar, makes it unfamiliar, and then makes it our own. It's so, that's why I read it every year. Because I will find more things, and I'm so excited. So this is probably my fourth copy of The Everlasting Man, and it's I give them away too.
It's my fifth copy. It's my fifth copy. The one I had on my honeymoon, I gave to my best man when I got home from my honeymoon. Never seen that one again, but.
Oh well, he's got a historic relic there.
Yeah, see,
that's so awesome, and this is such a monumental work for you. Could you share with us a little bit about the editing process, what this took out of you, and what you put into it?
Well, yeah, thank you. I have to give credit to Peter Floriani, because the two of us actually started out with this in mind, to do an annotated Everlasting Man 25 years ago. I mean, somewhere between 22 and 25 years ago.
Wow.
And we got some work done on it, and then it just kind of languished, and Peter went on to other projects, and I started getting distracted with other projects, and it just sat there. And in the meantime, I reread the book many, many times. And every once in a while, I'd pick up that folder and write down some notes, put some notes in there. And I had some other people that I talked to about this project of annotating, and they sent me different notes. So I had a decent file. And then Brandon Vaught from Word on Fire, and very wonderful, faithful Chestertonian who has written on Chesterton and who has helped start a Chesterton Academy in Orlando, Florida. lives the 3 acres and a cow lifestyle, but he does it with goats and chickens. He came to me from Word on Fire and said, "We want to do an annotated Everlasting Man, and we want you to do it." And this was what I needed to get back to it, and so I plunged in, and really just kind of redid all the things that we had done before. It was a complete redo. But I used that first go through as the basis to get it going, and then really went through the text closely to just try to circle everything that needed to have an explanation. And when this book came out, the first thing I did was open it up and that needed a footnote. That needed a footnote. and when my wife opened it up, the first thing she did was notice a typo. Don't tell anyone. It was unbelievable. After 1,000 copy, proof copies, and just it's but the commentary, the goal was to use Chesterton as much as possible in the footnotes. Not only for 2 reasons. One, he explains himself better than anybody else explains him, right? And 2, it just gives people more Chesterton to read. It shows what an amazingly expansive writer he is. It's absolutely astonishing how many references there are to works of literature, mythological figures, historical events, and he had that all inside his head. It's an absolutely astonishing tour de force, this book. And having to annotate, you realize that what that man knew it's just miraculous. He was truly a Thomistic gift from God, but then the great advantage of not having to go look up everything while you're reading it. I have done that for you, except for 3 or 4 things, and it's really a great tool to have at your hands. As far as the commentary goes, that was just a complete pleasure to write. That was just nothing but joy writing the commentary for each chapter.
Wonderful. It's like a trip into Chesterton's brain and accompanying him on his conversion. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's true. And of course, I teach the book every year to the seniors at Chesterton Academy, and so that always, for me, it always brings out new things, and I get to see people react to it for the first time once a year.
Wonderful.
Well, Dale, I have a question for you in terms of you've been working with Chesterton for so long, and you went back and you did this research with Peter, but was there anything, as you say, every time you read this book, Chesterton has rewritten it in between readings. So if you don't mind, what surprised you most, like in this project, after all of these years of working with Chesterton, what this time around working this project jumped out at you the most?
Yeah, I think, Joe, one of the reasons why this is one of the bookends of Chesterton's books is, even though he wrote a lot of books, set aside his fiction, his Father Brown collections and things like that, most of his nonfiction books are collections of essays, and very few of them are start to finish books. The books on Thomas Aquinas, the St. Francis book, Charles Dickens book, his first book, Robert Browning. They are complete books, but this one is more complete than all the other ones. This is clearly one he has thought out from the beginning to the end. He's got a real plan to it, and the more you read it, the more you see how intricate the design of the whole book is. It's not a slapdash thing where each chapter could be its separate essay. They are all really well connected, and I think the structure of the book really came out clearly as I did the annotation and the commentary.
Nice.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what was Evelyn Waugh thinking. Like, I could rewrite it. I'm like, really? I mean, you're excellent, but really, you could rewrite it? I don't know.
It's so funny. Both the things that Evelyn Waugh said about it are wrong. One is that it's self-explanatory. It's not. That he can rewrite it. You can't.
No, he couldn't. I mean, he's an
He loved the
excellent,
book. Clearly,
excellent author.
that's so interesting. He just loved it. Yeah.
Right. So that's a great endorsement there, but I definitely have to agree with you to disagree with him on that. So, so what is your hope for this, this edition? We had all these other editions and, it's been published throughout the years, but, there's a need for it, but I want to hear straight from you. What do you hope someone who picks up this book gets out of it, and what is your purpose and what's your ultimate, plan for this book?
Yeah, I mean, there never was an annotated version of this that I know of really before now, and so what I'm looking for is for people to really enjoy the book in depth the first time and not get lost and not get discouraged, as some people can do when they read Chesterton. I really want to be the Virgil to take you through the book, and that's, if more people could get through the whole book, they'll just be absolutely blessed by the book, and you know what, they'll want to read it again, because that's what you're always supposed to do with the Chesterton book.
Well, and I think it's wonderful too that not only will they want to read this again, but you've pointed them to so many of his essays. I see the Illustrated London News and other works behind you, and I've got some over here too. His work's so cohesive, and sometimes it gets lost because people say, okay, what should I read in Chesterton? And they hear Everlasting Man, Orthodoxy, Man Alive, all excellent choices. But if you skip his essays, you're missing a lot. And his spirituality and it's interwoven in everything he did. He was a journalist, but, he's got a lay spirituality that you can see seeped into everything. I mean, I know you know that, but that's the thing that's so exciting to me, that you're pointing people to those essays as well.
Thank you. Phenomenal. Yeah, I think his essays are so essential to reading Chesterton. I mean, if people ask me what book I should read, if you want to read pure Chesterton, I recommend the book of essays, the In Defense of Sanity. If you want to read pure Chesterton, that's where you should start. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great analogy. Excellent as well.
Well, kind of going off of that a little bit, what was your favorite chapters of this to work on, or just in general? Like, what's your favorite part of The Everlasting Man, if you have one?
Yeah, in part one, the Man in Mythologies is one of the favorite chapters, but I think in part one, the key chapter in that is the God and comparative religion. And that's the key to really the whole book in some ways, but certainly the key to part one. And so I went deeply into that because I knew how essential that chapter is to the rest of the book. And so I think I grew most close to that one.
I spent a lot of time with it,
Yeah.
I love it.
And in part two, those first three chapters are all so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the one that strikes you the one that strikes you the most is the first chapter. I think probably with just that one line, that the hands that created the stars and moon could not reach the huge heads of the cattle. That's a show-stopping line.
Very reminiscent of his poetry, his Christmas poetry.
Yes,
so much of that in there, and it's, if you've ever had a baby or if you've ever held a baby, you know exactly how wonderful that is.
Yeah, and of course he and his wife had such a devotion to the Nativity, and that shows up in that chapter.
Gorgeous. Well, do you guys have any favorites you want to share, Joe and Susan? And while we're at it, let's get nostalgic about The Everlasting Man. Why not?
Well, I have to say this time around, and I've just started doing my preparation for this book club, but I love that quote at the beginning of the introduction about, traveling all the way around the whole world and coming back. But right after that, he has a quote. I've been thinking about writing a book, but he has the perfect quote. My husband teases me. He's like, yeah, my book's amazing too, but I haven't written it. And that's what Chesterton says here. He says, like every book I never wrote, it is by far the best book I have ever written. Like, yeah, they really are good until you try to hammer them out. Not all of us are Dale Ahlquist. So.
Well, I found that the best book you can write is one that has already been written by someone else.
Well, yes.
That worked out really well for me.
That's the bonus. And then, like Dale said, that the fact that the incarnation is at the center of this book, that's where we're up to the incarnation, and then the incarnation literally split time in two. Chesterton acknowledges that through this work. And then, you see that echoed throughout everything that he writes. This incarnational, the Chesterton Academies have an incarnational environment. And what that means is that, the grace of the Holy Spirit is like incarnated in the teachers and the students. It's incarnated in us. And so this very human, very real, that's the most beautiful thing for me about Chesterton's spirituality, is that it's incarnational, and somehow all of us can fit into that. This sort of mixed up, mess that we are can fit into this beautiful plan. And I think, so just that general theme, the incarnational theme. So I won't give you another quote, but I'll say the fact that it centers around the incarnation just makes this book a true picture of history for me.
Yeah. And what did you say earlier, Sister? Was it you, Grettelyn? So how can you discuss the New Testament in one session, right?
That was Susan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, and you said not to compare this with the Bible, but you can compare this with the Bible in that it's split up the same way the Bible is. It's Old Testament and New Testament, and the Old Testament is longer than the New Testament, just like it is in this book, Part 1 and Part 2. And of course, it's split up the way history is split up. It's BC and AD, and BC is a longer period of time than AD. So it really, it's the whole history of the world in between two covers, and the only way to understand the history of the world is with Jesus at the center of it, the incarnation. Yeah.
Amen. Before I hear your opinions, Joe, I do want to hear your opinions. Everyone wants to hear your opinions. But I want to remind, I want to remind everybody in the chat that we are going to go to a Q&A session after this. So please have your questions ready. Please, we will prioritize questions about Dale and the book. If you want to know like the color of Dale's socks, sorry, we might skip your question. But please keep give us some great questions that we can field to Dale. And in the meantime, Joe, why don't you share with us a little bit of your favorite parts of the Everlasting Man?
Yeah. Well, the treatment of paganism, I think, was something that just really lit my mind on fire when I first read it. It was such a refreshing take, and I had been studying undergraduate philosophy at a good institution where we cover the classics. We go through antiquity, right? We go through reading, from Epictetus to the dialogues, obviously, of Plato, and then the some of the commentaries of Aristotle and things like that. But you what you do miss out on is just true raw history of the Roman Empire, and too much history that's taught, at least in the undergraduate program that I went to, tends to be like just church history. And so to get that history of what was the seedbed from a secular sense was just something I'd never seen anybody really do justice to before, especially without ideology overlaid. You had some kind of very romantic accounts of the ancient world, and you had some very naive accounts about the high achievements of this ancient civilization. And indeed it was. The Romans had very sophisticated plumbing, but they also left their children on the side of the road to die, right? So that's sort of and that's what Chesterton just nails. He really gets it, and he pinpoints precisely what the deeper reality was, that there was, it wasn't just matters of the flesh involved. It wasn't just a human civilization that was being dealt with there, that there were demons. So anyway, that was the part that really fired me up the first time I read it. I'm looking forward to rereading it this time around.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to reserve my favorite parts because I've read this book probably about 3 times, maybe more than that. But for me, Chesterton is sort of an amorphous blob after a while. And probably my favorite part of this is chapter 1 of all the chapters, but just because I think it's just a beautiful picture of the democracy of the dead, but I don't want to go too much into that. We'll get into that next time or the time after next time. But yeah, we want to hear from you. Give us some of your questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple here. So I guess we'll start with this. This was an earlier one from Kieran F562. But Dale, do you have, so this is a great thing that we have, the Everlasting Men, but I mean, do you have any plans to do this with other works?
Well, after having done this and being so pleased by the result, I think it would be fun to do it with the other books that I teach at Chesterton Academy, because they could then be used at the school. But the ones that strike me would be the book on St. Francis of Assisi and the book on St. Thomas Aquinas. And if I were to do any more, those would be the first 2 that I would tackle. I mean, we did that thing with orthodoxy where we did just the opposite. We edited it so that we doesn't need footnotes. We just took away the need for explanations, and a totally different approach to make it more readable. And there have been some other annotated orthodoxies out there, but that would be farther down the list, I guess.
Sure. So we also have a question here. This is from the Chesterton Academy of St. Michael. They say, Dale, can you extrapolate briefly the idea, when the world goes wrong, it proves rather that the church is right? And they're giving, look at this. This is great. This is why it's important to have this edition, because they're saying that's on page 11 at the bottom. So we can all go to the text. But let's see here. When the world goes wrong, it proves rather that the church is right.
I didn't know that he'd written that. Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful, paradoxical way that Chesterton uses the world and what's going on in the world to point to the truth. And the world and the church are always going in 2 different directions, which is why one of the great lines in the book is, the dead thing can go with the stream, only the living thing can go against it. And so when the world goes wrong, yes, everything about the world, which is what's happening right now, which is one of the themes of this book, these things keep happening. It proves that the church is right. If we'd followed church teachings, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in right now. Just from the very simple things like the 10 Commandments to the more very Catholic things such as confession and the Eucharist.
And he puts such a fine point on it too. When he points out those things, I think that's what's great about what's wrong with the world, because I see a lot of, the younger generation is saying there's something wrong and I'm not quite sure how to define it. And then I'm not quite sure how to answer it. And Chesterton has some very reasonable, answers to those questions that aren't reactionary. He tells us we can't go back and try to recreate a past that may never have existed. He gives us answers for moving forward, but moving forward with Christ, And then I love right after that, it says the church is justified not because her children do not sin, but because they do. And
I really like that line, because that's what the church is there for.
Yeah.
Sinners. If there were no sinners in the church, I guess we wouldn't need a church, would we, as much?
Well, it'd be empty. One of my favorite priests was asked, or was told, I don't want to go to the church, go to church. It's full of hypocrites. And he says, oh no, we could easily fit more hypocrites in.
Yeah.
There's a reason we're called practicing Catholics, right?
Exactly.
All right, let's.
We have a great
another one, Joe.
Yeah, sure. Joe, you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
I found an interesting one here that I'm interested by. I know there's a bit of a story behind this. So Bob M is asking, did H.G. Wells ever respond to GKC's response to his book? So maybe just address what is behind Bob's question first, Dale.
Really quickly, that this book is written in a response to a book written by H.G. Wells called The Outline of History. And I think that the main structure of this book is to address the main two problems with H.G. Wells' book, which he treats man as just another thing that crawled out of the muck, just another animal on the earth, and then treats Christ as just another man. And Chesterton says, he's really left out the main character in the story. Is what he's done. And so he wants to first establish that humans are unique. They are different from the other animals. Their story is completely different. And then he tells the human story. And then when Christ enters that story, history changes completely. And there's no possible explanation for what happened other than the Christian explanation. Well, what's interesting is that Belloc, Chesterton's great colleague, he went after Wells basically point by point and just wanted to rip him apart because he was so violently in disagreement with everything Wells had written. And Wells wrote Belloc wrote a response to the book. Wells wrote a response to Belloc, and then Belloc wrote another response to Wells, and it just became a major feud. So the great question, to answer the question, did Wells respond to Chesterton? Not in writing. But I'm sure that they discussed it together, which is what's so interesting. They definitely would be happy to spar in print about many things, but usually they were social things and just things of, general belief in God, but not particular Christian doctrines, and never this book. So that is a good question, and it's a pity that Wells never put himself in print in responding to it. He was too busy fighting with Belloc, is what the problem was.
Yeah, and I think it's notable that, as I recall the stories about it, that Wells and Belloc's relationship actually really soured after that, and that till his dying day, Wells had a very, very warm affection for Chesterton, and it goes to show something. Not to, this isn't to beat up on Belloc and malign Belloc, but I mean it's significant that Chesterton wrote this, frankly, much more magisterial takedown of Wells's thesis, and yet he still remained in his good graces. That's something to aspire to. Okay?
Yeah, it's a great testimony to his goodness and the fact that he didn't have enemies. People knew him; they were not his enemies.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's another one from Tim Myers for us Chesterton rookies. Do you have any advice for how we should approach the book? Well, I think the answer to that is
stay tuned.
Yeah, I would say join an online book club that's discussing the everlasting man. That'd be the quick one.
If only that existed, we would recommend that. We would recommend you join us every Wednesday at 7 Central, 8 Eastern, and enjoy the fun. Ask questions, participate, enjoy our special guests, and that we're going to be. We've got local society leaders coming. We have a wide range of beautiful Chestertonians coming. It's really going to be great. And then after that, or maybe during that, you decide you want to start your own local Chesterton society, and you get together with all your friends and you just keep the magic flowing. And then in July, you say, I'm going to Philly because you know what? I bet I'll find a lot of people there who love Chesterton. And then you get on the plane, the train, the automobile, you carpool with your friends and you head on up to the Chester and you scan that QR code right now. I feel like I'm on QVC and we'll have speakers. I mean, it's cram packed. I can't even believe how many speakers we have. And then we have the afterglows, we have mass, rosary. It is just a spiritual retreat. It's a family reunion. It is an intellectual pursuit. It's all of it all together. It's amazing. So.
And I want to add that one of the speakers is going to be a scholar from University of Dallas, Susan Hansen, who's a huge Chesterton fan and a good Chesterton scholar. And she'll be talking on part 2 of this book. And I guarantee she will bring out things that I did not bring out and that you hadn't thought of when you were reading the book. So that's, if you start falling in love with this book, you definitely want to hear Susan Hansen's talk at the conference.
Yeah,
And
and-
our schedule is such too that after the conference we go right into part 2 of this book. So you will get
What a design.
the Holy Spirit planned that one.
Sure
so
did.
she'll give that talk, and then we will hop right into part 2 of the book, and we can steal all her insights. It'll be great.
And as James points out in the conference, if for whatever reason you can't join us in person, although we'd love to see you in person, there is an online alternative. We've got an app. The fun is already started over on Whova. People are talking with each other. They're, making jokes. They're doing icebreakers. And then during the conference, the talks will be live streamed, and then they'll be recorded, and you'll be able to see them after. So the virtual alternative is a great low-cost alternative for those of you who can't make it in person. So thanks, James, for pointing that out in the chat. I appreciate that.
All right, let's hear some more questions.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to say one last thing to Tim Myers, because we had a bit of fun there. And Tim, you said Chesterton rookie going through this book. I do have 2 really practical pieces of advice. Besides, get this edition and use this book club. But seriously, be patient with yourself and don't feel like you have to get it all. Enjoy what you can enjoy of it and plow through the parts that maybe feel a little bit like you're not getting it. You will be picking up nuggets of wisdom that will delight you, and don't worry about the rest of it. And a lot of it builds in the accrual. You'll start to see the whole of the thing. You'll start to see the forest because you're not hyper-focused on the trees. So that's point number 1. And point number 2 is, just as Dale pointed out, that Susan Hansen's going to get this talk and bring out stuff he probably missed. Be prepared to read this book again. If you're a Chesterton rookie, you're reading this book for the first time, be prepared to revisit it, and be prepared not to be disappointed but delighted at the prospect of doing so.
Yeah, Chesterton is a relationship, so feel free to keep coming back and get to know him more and more and more and more. Okay, so we've got about probably 10 more minutes for questions. Let's pick some good
one
ones.
of the questions that came up was, what was the missing word in the last sentence in chapter 1, Man in the Cave? Now, we're not talking about chapter 1 tonight, but someone wants to know what the missing word is in there. So if you go to page 54, the last sentence of chapter 1 in part 1. But if we must have sequence and necessity, all right, the word I took out was, but if we must needs have sequence and necessity. Now that is a proper English usage, but it just doesn't work. And out it went, because I remember a long time ago people saying to me, "Can you explain this sentence to me?" And I said, "Huh." And so we took that word out, and that helped, but it still needs a translation, which I translate in the footnote.
All right. What's a good one, Joe? Give us.
Well, let's see. Yeah,
dinger.
Rob Grieving has a good one. It's kind of 2-part. Rob from Maryland. Could you comment on how long it took GKC to write this book? And then, so we did talk about your writing process at the beginning. What about GKC's? And then, what were some of other people's reactions at the time? So we heard Wells did not react, but what were other reception pieces?
Well, to answer the first question, there's no indication that it took him a long time to write it. You could kind of tell when he's working on a book, because parts of it will show up in his journalism as he's writing it. Yeah. And there's just very few references to the things he's talking about in the book for a very long time. And, most of his writing was very quick. And I would imagine he probably completed this in, probably 8 or 9 sittings, probably. So probably over the course of a couple of weeks, he probably wrote this book, because that would be par for the course for him. It's astonishing to think about that. Just blows your mind how quickly he could write and how the things poured out of him. But he clearly had a plan he had a plan. I think he even says there's a plan. That's how he starts out, the plan of this book. And that's what's interesting. And he probably, one of the things you notice is there's 3 different introductions to the book when you're writing it. And I think, just getting anything started always takes a little hard. Everybody who's done any writing, it's hard to get started. And he had 3 starts at the book before he got going, and the engine starts really turning over. And then other reactions. The book didn't make as big a splash as some of his other books did in terms of a critical reception, but it was well received, and I think it's one of those things. It's a book that grew in popularity as time went on because of the many people who read it and whose lives were changed by it, because it was definitely a life-changing book for many people who read it. But there's some major reviews and major publications that came out, but it wasn't a spectacular reception at the time. All right, one more question, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's take one more here. Let me bring that one off, and then let's see. I like this one. It's sort of not necessarily related to the book, but Steve Miller is asking if Everlasting Man was the first thing you read of Chesterton. It's kind of because we've all heard that part of your conversion story, Dale. What was the second thing? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was it was St. Francis of Assisi.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and then Heretics. So, no, I think I read Heretics 4th. Yeah, I read Orthodoxy 3rd, then Heretics. Yeah. So, because I thought that should be the right sequence, but I should have read, done that the other way around. But yeah, St. Francis was the second book, and very straightforward read. I was still a long ways from becoming a Catholic, but I do remember one line from the St. Francis book that struck me when he describes that, it's hard to look straight. You can't look at the sun, just like it's hard to comprehend Christ, but you can look at the light of the moon, which reflects the light of the sun, and St. Francis is reflecting the light of Christ. And so you can see the light of Christ reflecting off of St. Francis. And I said, oh, that's a pretty good argument for, the communion of the saints, but ignore that, Dale. And I did. All right.
But not for long.
Not for long.
Wonderful.
Yeah. For me, the great line in this book, in the Everlasting Man, there's just so many great lines, but I think one of the key lines is one that I've already quoted tonight, but it's the one we keep coming back to anytime we're talking about Chesterton or about the Christian faith in today's world. The dead thing goes with the stream. Only the living thing can go against it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, and as we're in our live stream going against the stream, sorry, I had to. Just want to remind everybody that we will be back next week, same time, same place. If you've signed up, you will get an email letting you know how to join this live stream again. We will not have Dale, but Susan, remind me who our special guest, if we have one next week, or is it just the 3 of us?
It's just the 3 of us for the introduction. And then for the first chapter, we've got Mike Creevy of the Gracious Guest, who is also the Harrisburg area local society leader, will be joining us, and it's sure to be an amazing conversation. So next week you just have to deal with the 3 of us.
It'll be much better. It'll be much better without me. But next week, the reason I can't be with you is I'll be at Wheaton College at the Wade Center in Illinois, talking about the Everlasting Man.
Beautiful.
So Dale will be doing a different kind of live event, and
yes,
we'll be doing our own kind of live event.
And if you see
parallel.
him at the Wade Center, you can see these recordings after the live stream, so you won't have to miss out. Dale, you can watch it after your presentation.
Right.
Go back to the hotel and pour yourself your favorite beverage and watch the show like with everybody else. So
yep, and we will help put you to sleep. No, really.
It's one of our many services.
But yeah, please make sure that you join us again next week. if you're not getting the emails, you can add news@chesterton.org to your contact list. That's news as in like a newspaper at chesterton.org. That should ensure that we don't go to your spam folder. And like Susan said, our discussions will be recorded. So if for some strange reason you have a sucking chest wound and you have to miss, you can always get our discussions afterwards. They will be recorded. And we are really looking forward to unpacking this book with you and with all of our friends that we have lined up. Yeah. Anything I missed, guys?
Well, I'll just say, this is an exciting opportunity for us, and we're also kind of trying something new here. So be patient with us if there's any little hiccups along the way, although I think tonight went really well. And we will get more opportunity. This week we were kind of really focused on just the production of this great new work by Dale, and we had the opportunity to talk with him. But from here out, it's going to run very much like a book club, and we'll have kind of a really text-based discussion of what the reading was for that week, and you'll be able to participate, I think, more engagedly in the chat as we go through those discussion points. So I just want to thank everybody who turned out. We had over 275 people at any given time watching, lots of people in the chat, and we've had over 800 people sign up to get the notices and tune into the recordings of this. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't tell your friends. So tell your friends, chesterton.org/everlastingman, chesterton.org/everlastingman. Get them to sign up too, because the more people can join us, the happier we'll all be.
Yes. And those of you who joined us from Australia and Bangkok, God bless you. That is so awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dale, for joining us. This has been really great. So awesome to dive into your process for this book. And thank you again so much for this labor of love that you have gifted to the world. We are so excited to have this edition that really only you could have put together, this Chesterton on Chesterton kind of edition. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And as always, thank you, Joe and Susan. This is going to be great. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us in the chat. Please feel free to continue leaving comments on this YouTube video and let us know what your favorite part of The Everlasting Man is, what you're most looking forward to in this book discussion. And we will see you next week. Thank you. Chesterton is always better with friends. See you later. Have a good night.